Jake Stuart with the National Sports Media Association. Today, I am joined by Rhode Island Sports Writer of the Year, Mark Daniels. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Mark is a writer for the Providence Journal in Rhode Island. Mark, I want to ask you, what first brought you into the industry? What made you want to be a sports writer?
I knew I wanted to be a sports writer back when I was in high school, and really what started was my high school program had this thing. We had a job shadow someone for a day. A lot of my friends just said they were shadowing their dad and stayed home and watched TV or played PlayStation. I actually got hooked up with someone at the Boston Herald who took me to a Red Sox game. His name was Steve Conroy at the time. He was general assignment sports writer. He's now their Bruins beat guy. But yeah, I saw the Red Sox play Toronto Blue Jays. And I was just like, wow, people do this for a living. They watch sports. They sit in the press box. Like, I was on the field. It was, for someone who was 16, it was an incredible moment. So from that point forward, I was like, I'm going to be a sports writer. I'm going to cover professional sports in New England. And I started writing for my student paper in high school. I went to the University of New Hampshire. I studied journalism there. I covered football at UNH. When I was at the University of New Hampshire, Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator, and it was a lot of fun. This was before Chip went to Oregon and then the NFL. So I kind of fell in love with football. And then when I graduated, I actually got a job at the Boston Herald. Kind of through that job shadow, I contacted the sports editor, and I really had to work my way up, though. I edited stats in the newspaper probably until about 2:00 in the morning. I made no money doing it, but I did it to try to get writing opportunities, and I did. And, it took me a while, but 7 years later, I was sort of covering the Patriots part-time, and that led me to go to the Providence Journal, where I've covered the Pats full-time since 2014. So yeah, it's been fun, but honestly, I knew I wanted to do this since I was 16. So really, really happy it worked out.
That's awesome. What a wild ride. And I love the part you mentioned just about the Boston Herald and how, full circle that was for you. That's such a sweet story. I want to ask you, so this is your first award from the National Sports Media Association. What does it mean to you to be honored and recognized?
Yeah, it was great. There's a lot of talented sports writers in Rhode Island. People do such a great job, especially covering the local stuff from, the college hoops, high school sports. Obviously, Brendan McGeer is super talented, and Bill Koch, my colleagues wanted a ton of time. So it was nice to get my name on that list. Finally, I didn't know, I do a lot of national stuff and Pats coverage, but over the past year, I've tried to become a little bit more localized, and I've done more college hoops and more Rhode Island centric stories. And yeah, but it's a great honor. It's one of those things, not only on the resume, but you think of it long term. It's like, yeah, maybe this is my obit, right? Rhode Island Sports Writer of the Year. It's cool. I'm definitely pumped about it.
Well, I know you've been writing since, before college and in college, and you've been doing it for a very long time. So this next one might be tough to do, but, can you tell our listeners maybe about a story that you've been working on or that you wrote that really stands out to you so far?
Yeah. So my goal in journalism is to be different. There's so many people who cover the Patriots, and in general, there's so many talented sports writers out there. You need to separate yourself from the pack. So for me, I try to do it with human interest stories. And the best example ever was my first year on the Patriots beat, 2014. Training camp, there was this Division II undrafted kid named Malcolm Butler who no one knew. He didn't play really that season. But I got to know him a little bit. And that summer, I wrote a story about him, and I wanted to write something just different about him. And I noticed he had a gap in sort of his resume. He was in a JUCO, then a D2, but there was a year missing. So what did he do? He told me he got kicked out of school, and he worked at a Popeyes for a year. And working at Popeyes made him realize how much he was football, and he wanted to get back into it. So he did. So I wrote this feature about how Malcolm Butler was working, for Popeyes for a year before getting back into football. Fast forward, 6-7 months, Malcolm Butler makes one of the biggest plays in Super Bowl history. And everyone's like, who's this kid who didn't play? Well, I'm the only one on the beat who wrote a feature about him. It doesn't matter if it's a practice squad guy, a starter, a Pro Bowler. Everyone has a story, and it's my goal, regardless of sort of their status, to write it. And that was just a great example of what could happen, because Malcolm Butler intercepts Russell Wilson on the goal line. My man, Mike Reese, ESPN, tweets out my story, and it goes viral. And, all that offseason, people were trying to write sort of a similar Malcolm Butler Popeye story. Well, I had the first one. And, I don't know, that story was probably read over 1 million times. It was by far our most read story at the Providence Journal. But it was just a really great example of trying to be different, trying to tell a story and, make a different call. You never know what these guys have gone through to get to the NFL. And, that one certainly worked out and has always resonated.
That's so awesome, Mark, and such a sweet story. I want to ask you too, what goes into, for our listeners in the searching process, how do you find these stories and be different, and what goes into, just that process for you?
I read everything. Like if I see a player on the Patriots who I want to write about, I'll look up every single story that's been written about him that I can find on the internet. For example, last year the Pats signed this guy Matt Judon who makes a Pro Bowl for him. I wanted to write a Matt Judon story that was different, and I read a Q&A from when he was a rookie with the Ravens that just mentioned that he spent the previous 2 summers as a counselor for adults with disabilities. I thought that was interesting. It was just a little line on something no one would know about him. This was, I don't know, 6 years ago. So I looked up where he worked. I found the director, some counselors who worked with him. I talked with him about it, just sort of how, him working with, people with disabilities sort of shaped who he was. And that stemmed from a Q&A his rookie year, that people, but like for me, I want to see what's been written about him, about somebody, so I don't write it. But I want to see if there's anything like that, a throwaway line in a story where I say, that's interesting. I want to look a little bit more into it. And sometimes just a question, like with Malcolm Butler, it's, what did he do for a year that he wasn't playing football? I think for me, it's part of the journey, getting to know people and, researching everything. But as a reporter, you have to research, there's a lot out there now on Google. So, yeah.
I love that, a little bit of extra digging and, reading, as you mentioned, can go a long way in finding that really sweet story and that, that perspective that all those other writers aren't having. I wanted to ask you too, what, if at all, how much did your work change as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, it changed completely. I haven't been in the Patriots locker room since Tom Brady was there. Back in the day, we'd get 45 minutes in the locker room 4 or 5 days a week, and that would give you the opportunity to get to know people, talk to them one-on-one, a lot of off-the-record conversations about life, kids, music, and that would help you build up relationships. And for me, it would help me get to know people before I wrote about them. I didn't have that. With the Zoom interviews, it was just a lot more impersonal. Just you didn't get to know. I don't know the last 2, rookie classes of the Patriots. I don't know the free agent additions really as much as I used to. So that's a lot different. And even writing feature stories is harder because I could go up to someone in the locker room and be like, I want to write something about you. Who should I talk to? And they could just give me like their dad's cell number. That's not happening on Zoom. So I had to be a lot more creative. I'd say my job got a lot more difficult because of COVID, just because I was so far removed from, the personal relationship aspect of my job.
And I, you mentioned earlier working for the Boston Herald and talking about, some of your inspiration to get into sports writing. Who were some of those people that inspired you to write? Who are some of the sports writers that you read and that got you into sports writing?
So funny enough, it was Jackie McMullen. She went to the University of New Hampshire as well. She would come back to our the college, UNH, and she would talk to our class. I want to say 2 or 3 times. I loved it. As someone who wanted to be a sports writer, having Jackie Mack come to our class and tell us old Larry Bird Celtic stories was amazing. I always looked up to her. Her feature writing is just phenomenal. She's one of the greatest of all time. Obviously, she'll be recognized at the event later this year, and it's really cool for me to be honored at the same time. She's also going to be honored. But yeah, she was a huge one for me, and I really always loved her stuff. And I was also mentored by a lot of good people at the Boston Herald. Karen Grevian, helped me out a lot. Jeff Howe helped me out a lot, and I worked for a year with Ann Rappaport, who's at the Herald as well. So I learned a lot from Ann, Jeff, and Karen. They just really showed me the ropes and how to be a beat writer. But yeah, it started certainly with Jackie Mack at UNH.
Wow. Well, she's, like you said, going to be awarded this summer as well. Pretty big names that you mentioned and all that have been, recognized in some way or another. Well, the last question I want to ask you, Mark, and thank you again for your time and for being here. What advice would you offer to, our younger sports writers who, in this digital world are just kind of getting into the industry?
If you want to do something, you have to do it. You have to get as much experience as possible. If you want to be a sports writer, you have to find an outlet to do it. Right. If you're in high school, write for your student paper. If you're, in college, write for your student paper. Even like an internship is huge, but find an internship that will allow you to actually write. And it doesn't matter the event, high school, college, honestly, Little League, it really doesn't matter. If you can write a good feature story about a high school kid, you can do it about an NFL athlete. It takes time and experience to learn how to write, but also learn how to talk to people and interview people. And you're not going to get any of that without just doing it. I talk to a lot of young, writers or, budding writers. And I'm just like, do you write for your school paper? And the amount of people who say no is sort of unbelievable to me. Like, especially if you're at a college with college sports teams, and you want to be a sports writer, write about them. just do it. It's right there. It's the best thing to do. You know, like for me, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't cover UNH football for 3 years when I was at UNH. That showed me how to do it. But also, I mean, I covered hockey, soccer, basketball. I did a little of everything, and it made me a lot more well-rounded. So get that experience if you want to do it.
And so, right in front of you, might as well just take it. You said it, and I love that advice. Well, thank you so much for being here, Mark, our 2021 Rhode Island Sportswriter of the Year. We hope to see you in Winston this summer for the awards ceremony, and congratulations on your award.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.